Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Witch's Curse. The Isle of Wight had always been a place of natural beauty, but it was also steeped in folklore. Ghostly tales of shipwrecks, haunted woods, and ancient druidic rituals passed down through generations. None, however, were more feared than the tale of the Witch of Wroxall, a sinister figure said to have cursed the island centuries ago. The village of Wroxall had forgotten her until the curse was reawakened. Holly Arnold had returned to the island to escape the pressures of her city life. The seaside breeze, rolling hills, and quiet lanes of Wroxall seemed like the perfect place to reset her mind. She rented a small, ivy-covered cottage at the edge of the village, nestled near the woods. The villagers had welcomed her with cautious smiles, but their eyes carried an unspoken warning, one that Holly couldn't yet decipher. The first night in her new home was peaceful, but something in the air felt strange. As Holly lay in bed, a faint, eerie humming sound drifted through the open window. She assumed it was just the wind moving through the trees and drifted into an uneasy sleep. The following morning, Holly visited the local market. She overheard snippets of conversation among the villagers, fragments of old gossip that sounded odd. They spoke of livestock dying suddenly, strange symbols carved into doors, and shadows that moved where no light should cast them. She couldn't help but feel unsettled. When she asked one of the shopkeepers, a wrinkled old woman named Martha, about the strange things she'd heard, Martha's face turned pale. "You're staying in the old bramble cottage, aren't you?" she asked. Holly nodded. "Yes, why?" Martha sighed. "That house that's close to the woods, there are things in those woods, things that have been there since long before any of us were born." Holly asked, her curiosity growing. "The Witch of Wroxall. She cursed this village long ago. Every night she brings terror to those who stray too close to her domain. There's been peace for a while, but it seems the curse is stirring again." The rational part of her dismissed the story as superstitious nonsense. But as the sun began to set that evening, the unease returned. The air seemed colder, heavier. That night the humming returned, but louder this time, almost melodic. It wasn't the wind, there was a pattern to it, a tune that sent shivers across her skin. As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, something scraped against the outside of her window. Holly sat up, her heart pounding. It wasn't an animal, and it wasn't a tree branch. She tiptoed to the window and peeked outside. There, in the moonlight, she saw it carved into the wood of her window frame was an unfamiliar symbol, a spiral-like mark that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Her breath caught in her throat. Her first instinct was to call someone, but who would believe her? The next day, she visited the village library, hoping to find some historical context for what she had seen. The librarian, a quiet man named Edmund, reluctantly pulled out an old, dust-covered tome. "This is all we have on local folklore," he said. Holly flipped through the brittle pages, her eyes scanning faded illustrations and text. Then she found a section on the Witch of Wroxall. The curse had begun in the 1600s after a woman named Morwenna was accused of witchcraft by the village council. The council had burned her at the stake, but with her dying breath she had cursed the land and all those who lived on it. Strange occurrences began immediately after her death. Crops withered, livestock died, and villagers disappeared without a trace. The humming, the symbols, and the strange deaths had all been recorded in the years following her death. It was said that the witch's spirit roamed the woods, seeking revenge on the descendants of those who had wronged her. Holly felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Was the witch targeting her? She wasn't even from Wroxall, but she was living in the bramble cottage right near the woods where Morwenna's body had been burned. That evening, Holly tried to convince herself it was all just a coincidence. She locked her doors and windows, drew the curtains tight, and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. The humming was back, louder than ever. It was as if the very air was vibrating with it. Then a sharp knock echoed through the cottage. Holly's heart raced. She hesitated for a moment, gripping the edge of her bed tightly. Another knock, this time more forceful. She took a deep breath and forced herself to stand. Her legs felt weak, but she made her way to the front door. When she opened it, there was nothing there. just the thick darkness of the night and the sound of the wind whispering through the trees. Holly shuddered, about to close the door when her eyes caught something on the ground. Another symbol, drawn in dirt just outside her doorstep. This one was different from the first, a jagged, angular shape that felt even more sinister. Holly quickly shut the door and locked it, her hand shaking. She backed away slowly, only to hear footsteps above her, footsteps that shouldn't be there. She lived alone. A cold dread settled over her. She grabbed a flashlight and made her way cautiously upstairs. Each creak of the floorboards felt like thunder in the silence. As she reached the top of the stairs, the footsteps stopped. The hallway was empty, but a shadow moved at the end, just outside her bedroom door. Holly's breath came in ragged gasps. She aimed the flashlight down the hallway, but the beam of light wavered in her trembling hand. Slowly she approached the shadow, her heart pounding so loud she feared it would burst from her chest. As she reached her bedroom door, the shadow melted away, leaving behind nothing but an oppressive silence. Holly stepped into her room, her flashlight casting long shadows across the walls. There was no one there, but her bed was rumpled, as if someone had been lying in it. And on her pillow another symbol had been etched, this one carved into the fabric itself. She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Something was coming for her, and she didn't know how to stop it. The following morning, Holly drove into town, desperate for help. She found Martha at the market again and begged her for answers. "You have to leave," Martha said. "The curse isn't just a story, more when a spirit is real, then she's been waiting for centuries to finish what she started." Holly asked, her voice trembling. "I'm not from here, it doesn't matter. You're in her land now, you live near the woods, and she's claimed you. The only way to stop her is to find her grave and destroy whatever remains of her power, with no other options." According to the book she'd found at the library, Morwenna had been buried in an unmarked grave deep within the woods. Armed with a shovel and a heavy sense of dread, Holly ventured into the forest that evening, the sun sinking low behind the trees. The woods were thick with mist, and the deeper Holly went, the more disoriented she became. The humming returned, louder than ever, wrapping around her like a suffocating fog. But Holly pressed on, determined to end the nightmare. Hours passed before she stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center stood an ancient, twisted tree, its bark blackened and scarred. At its base was a stone marker, barely visible under the dirt and leaves. Holly began to dig, her hands blistering as she worked. The humming grew unbearable, ringing in her ears, but she didn't stop. After what felt like hours, her shovel hit something solid, a wooden box, old and rotting. She pried it open, and inside she found a small bundle of bones wrapped in a tattered piece of cloth. As she stared at the remains, a cold wind whipped through the clearing, and the air around her grew darker, thicker. The shadow of the witch seemed to loom over her, watching, waiting. Holly didn't hesitate. She grabbed the bundle of bones and threw them into the fire she'd prepared. As the flames engulfed the remains, the humming stopped and the oppressive weight in the air lifted. For a moment Holly thought it was over. But as she turned to leave, a voice whispered in her ear, low and malevolent. "You may have burned my bones," the witch hissed, "but you can't burn a curse." The ground beneath Holly's feet trembled. The curse had not been broken. It had only just begun. Holly stumbled back from the fire, her heart hammering in her chest as the ground beneath her feet trembled. The whisper of the witch echoed in her mind, and the forest seemed to close around her, its once peaceful trees now a tangle of dark shapes, reaching for her with gnarled branches. She couldn't breathe. Panic took hold, and she ran. Branches scraped her arms and face as she pushed through the thick underbrush, the eerie silence of the forest broken only by her ragged breaths. Behind her, shadows flickered in the corners of her vision, twisting into shapes that didn't belong in this world. They were watching, stalking. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the woods, the village lights faintly visible through the mist. Her legs gave out as she collapsed onto the road, gasping for air. For a long moment she lay there, staring up at the moonlit sky, trying to steady her thoughts. But the witch's words continued to echo in her mind, a dark reminder that the nightmare was far from over. The next day, Holly knew she had to leave the Isle of Wight. Whatever Morwenna had done to curse this land, it was beyond her control now. She had tried to break the curse, but something more ancient, more powerful, still lingered. It wasn't just the witch's spirit that haunted the village, it was the curse itself, a malevolent force that fed on fear, twisting the very land it plagued. Holly packed her belongings as quickly as she could, the oppressive weight of the night still fresh in her mind. The villagers would understand her sudden departure. If anything, they had expected it. She could see it in their faces when she went to the market earlier that morning, the looks of pity and thinly veiled relief that they weren't the ones trapped in the curse. As she loaded the last of her bags into her car, a figure approached her from the road. It was Edmund, the librarian, his face drawn and pale. "And with you leaving," he said. Holly nodded, slamming the trunk shut. "I have to. It's not safe here. I tried to stop it, but the curse, it's not something you can just break. You burned her bones. It didn't do. How did you know it? The curse, you said. It's tied to more than just her body. Morwenna's spirit lingers because she bound herself to the land. Her vengeance is rooted in the soil, in the stones, in the very air we breathe. Burning her bones wouldn't stop it. It may have even made it worse." "What do you mean, worse?" Edmund glanced around. "You've awakened her fully. Now she's not just haunting the woods. She's free. The curse will spread, and it won't stop until it consumes everything. You've given her power." She had tried to help, but instead, she had unleashed something far more dangerous. "So, what do I do now?" she asked. Edmund hesitated for a moment before speaking. "There's an old legend, older than Morwenna herself. It said that the only way to end the curse is to find the source of her power, what bound her to this land in the first place. Her revenge was born from the injustice done to her, but there's something deeper, to something that gave her the power to curse the village." Holly repeated. "Like what?" "The book," Edmund replied. "A grimoire. Morwenna was said to have a grimoire of ancient spells, ones that could summon forces beyond our world. If it still exists, it might hold the key to breaking the curse, but no one knows where it is. Some say it was hidden in the village. Others believe it's buried somewhere in the forest." Holly felt a flicker of hope. If the grimoire existed, it might be her only chance to end this nightmare. But it also meant venturing deeper into the heart of the curse, into the very places that were now most dangerous. "Where do I start looking?" Edmund handed her a folded piece of parchment, its edges yellowed with age. "This is a map. It's old, passed down through my family for generations. My ancestors were among those who condemned Morwenna, and we've been cursed ever since. The map might help you find where she hid the book." Holly unfolded the parchment. It showed the village, the woods, and a strange marking in the northern part of the island, an area she hadn't explored. Thank you." Edmund nodded, but his expression remained grim. "Be careful, Holly. Morwenna's power grows with every passing day. The deeper you go, the stronger she'll become. You may be the only one who can stop her now." Holly took a deep breath and nodded. She had no choice. If she didn't stop the witch, the curse would spread, devouring everything in its path. That evening, she set off toward the northern woods, the map clutched tightly in her hand. The sky was overcast, the sun hidden behind thick clouds, casting a dull grey light over the landscape. The further she walked, the more the land seemed to wither around her. Trees bent at unnatural angles, their branches twisted and bare. The air grew colder, and the once vibrant island felt drained of life, as if Morwenna's curse was already spreading its tendrils beyond Roxall. As Holly neared the marked location on the map, she came upon an ancient stone circle, half buried in the earth. The stones were covered in strange, indecipherable symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. In the center of the circle, the ground was disturbed. Loose dirt and fallen leaves covered what appeared to be the entrance to an underground chamber. Her heart raced as she cleared the debris, revealing a stone door set into the ground. It was heavy, but after some effort, Holly managed to pry it open. A dark staircase led downward, disappearing into the earth. With a deep breath, she descended into the darkness, the air thick and heavy with the scent of decay. Her flashlight flickered as she reached the bottom of the stairs, revealing a small, dusty chamber. In the center of the room was a stone pedestal, and resting atop it was an ancient, leather-bound book, the grimoire. Holly's hand shook as she reached for the book. The air around her seemed to hum with dark energy, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to move, watching her. She knew this was the source of Morwenna's power, the book that had given her the ability to curse the village. But as she lifted the grimoire, a cold wind swept through the chamber, and the door behind her slammed shut. The shadows thickened, coalescing into a figure Morwenna herself, her eyes burning with hatred. "You cannot undo what has been done," a witch hissed. "This land will never be free of me." She had the book, but now she had to use it to reverse the curse, to banish the witch once and for all. But could she do it in time? Could she wield the dark power that had destroyed so many before her? As Morwenna's shadowy form advanced, Holly opened the grimoire, her fingers trembling as she found the incantation she needed. The final battle had begun. Holly's heart pounded in her chest as she stared down at the ancient text, her trembling fingers tracing the faded ink. The words on the page were in a language she didn't recognize, but they seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Morwenna's shadowy figure loomed closer, her burning eyes fixed on Holly, filled with centuries of rage. "You cannot escape me," Morwenna hissed. "This land is mine, I am the curse, and I will never be undone." She knew she had no choice but to use the grimoire, but how? The symbols, the words, they were foreign to her, steeped in a magic far older than anything she could comprehend. The room grew colder, and the shadows around her seemed to writhe, pressing in on her like dark, sentient creatures. In a desperate move, Holly spoke the words aloud, stumbling over the strange syllables. Her voice echoed in the chamber, mixing with the witch's whispers. As the incantation filled the air, the room began to tremble. The shadows recoiled, and Morwenna let out a shriek of fury, her form flickering like a dying flame. But something was wrong. The energy coursing through Holly's body wasn't just targeting Morwenna, it was surging toward her, too, like a tidal wave crashing into both of them. The power of the curse was too vast, too ancient. Holly had underestimated it. Morwenna's laughter rang out, dark and triumphant. "You think you can control it, foolish girl. You will fall as they all have fallen." Suddenly the ground beneath Holly's feet split open, and the stone circle above them groaned as dark tendrils of energy shot up from the earth, twisting into the sky. The curse was unraveling, but not in the way Holly had hoped. Instead of lifting the darkness, it was intensifying, as if the very core of the island was being ripped apart. Holly screamed, clutching the grimoire. "This isn't right." Morwenna's form swirled around her. "The curse is not just a spell, it is the island. You cannot destroy me without destroying everything." Holly staggered backward. She couldn't stop the curse this way. The grimoire wasn't the key to breaking it, it was the source of it, a conduit for the witch's power. Destroying the book would only make the curse stronger, binding it even deeper into the island's bones. She had to do something drastic. Gathering every ounce of her will, Holly turned to the grimoire once more, this time searching for something different. A banishment spell, one that could seal Morwenna's spirit, trap it, and end her reign of terror without destroying the land itself. But the pages were worn, the text faded. She flipped through the ancient tome frantically, her fingers trembling as she found what she needed. The banishment spell was ancient, but dangerous. It required a sacrifice. Holly's pulse quickened as she read the words, realizing what it would take. To banish Morwenna and sever the curse, someone had to offer themselves up to take the place of the witch. It was a trade one soul for another, to balance the scales of power. Holly's mind raced. She could feel Morwenna closing in, her twisted, shadowy form circling around her, growing more solid with every passing second. The witch was regaining strength, feeding on the very curse that had plagued the island for centuries. "You cannot defeat me," Morwenna whispered. "Give in, the land will rot, the village will burn, and I will rise again." She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. If she didn't act, Morwenna would be unstoppable. The curse would consume not only Rugsel but the entire Isle of Wight. Everything would be lost. Her fingers tightened around the grimoire, the banishment spell burning in her mind. She had to make a choice. The village. The people. The land. Holly took a deep breath and made her decision. She began the incantation, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. The words of the spell echoed through the chamber, filling the air with a strange, humming resonance. As she spoke, the shadows recoiled, and Morwenna let out a piercing scream, her form wavering, flickering like a dying flame. "You cannot do this," the witch shrieked. "You are nothing. The air around her crackled with energy as she completed the spell, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the magic pulling at her, drawing her deeper into its grasp. She knew what was coming, but there was no turning back. With the final word of the incantation, a blinding light filled the chamber. The ground shook violently, and the air seemed to split open as the banishment spell took hold. More when a shadowy form was ripped apart, her scream of fury echoing through the night as she was pulled into the void. But as the witch was banished, Holly felt the pull of the magic take hold of her, too. She had made the sacrifice. She was the one who would take Morwenna's place, bound to the island, to the curse. The light around her faded, and the shadows closed in, wrapping around her like a cocoon. The last thing Holly saw before the darkness claimed her was the island, peaceful and quiet once more. The curse had been broken, but at a terrible cost. Weeks later, the villagers of Roxo spoke in hushed tones about Holly Arnold, the woman who had disappeared into the woods and never returned. The strange occurrences that had plagued the village for centuries had stopped, and the land seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The witch was gone. But some nights, when the wind blew just right, a faint humming could be heard coming from the woods, and the villagers would shiver, glancing toward the trees. They knew the curse had been lifted, but they also knew that Holly Arnold had taken the witch's place, and she would watch over the Isle of Wight forever. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.